Magic seized him when he was only 3 years old. When he turned 5, every god in existence blessed him, and his stats skyrocketed way beyond anything the world had ever seen. So yeah, he smashed the highest level this world allows, and now he can do every wild thing you've ever dreamed of. Before I ruin the surprise, let's dive into the story. In the royal capital, the Silford household's distant residents tried to catch Rain von Silford. She wanted to greet her brother, but when she saw him mid-change, she blurted an apology. Cain von Silford waved it off, grinning like it was no big deal at all, because of course he'd been changing anyway. As his older sister praised his look, Cain suddenly remembered his earlier name, Kaziashina. Then boom, he reincarnated in this world, and now lives as Cain von Silford, the Margrave of Gracious' third son. Rieni finally spilled why she'd come. Turns out Cain was staying over, and she'd rushed in to invite him for tea, then planned a stroll through the garden right after. Actually, Cain was gearing up to hit the guild. So he swallowed his pride, apologized on the spot, and swore he'd make good on her request next time. A maid stopped her in the hallway, puzzled that she wasn't by Cain's side, until she learned Cain had headed to the guild. She gasped that he was going there again, because Cain hits the guild every single day, even from his other residence. Ever since Cain snapped his memories back at age 3, like waking up to a life he'd forgotten, he'd secretly been training magic in the shadows. Then at 5 years old, during his baptism, the gods finally revealed why he was reborn and demanded that he build and shape this world. And somehow he landed these absolutely insane blessings, with stats so ridiculous they felt unreal. But the one thing he couldn't beat was the age rule. Adventurer registration only opens for kids from 12 and up. At 12 years old, he finally gets to become the adventurer he's been dreaming about his whole life. He's itching to roam across countries and tiny towns, hell, even chase places nobody's mapped yet. He can't wait to dive deeper and see everything this world has to offer. But there's a whole other problem waiting in the shadows. Because his stats are so insanely over the top, they feel like cheating. Seriously, they're beyond absurd. They're basically cheating outright, and the more he stares, the more ridiculous it gets. Even though the king and the top officials already knew, they buried the truth, because he could spell disaster for the nation. Magic and blessings are only meant to cap at level 5, yet his power shot up to level 10. He's already landed in hot water because of it, so he'd better stay sharp and stop grabbing attention. His stunning mom, Sarah von Silford, the second wife, spotted him as he barreled downstairs and shot a question. Was he heading out? Cain nodded and told her he was going straight to the guild. Sarah clocked that he looked pale as a ghost and asked, straight up, if he'd been pushing himself too hard. Even after Cain's been split from her since he got made a baron at 10, his mom clocked everything, so he swallowed his worries, told her he was fine, and promised he'd just swing by the guild real quick today. Ever since Cain's always handled things more responsibly than most kids, Sarah can't stop worrying about what's coming next. She told him to take care, and he snapped back, yes, then promised he'd be back in no time. He pushed through the noisy market until he finally hit the guild, then stepped inside. A receptionist sized him up with the right kind of confidence, then grinned and said he'd been coming in every day lately. Cain nodded along, keeping his hopes up that this time he'd finally land the right request. Today, the guild was packed to the rafters. Rookie adventurers had flooded in like wildfire. So yeah, every fun request gets snatched up instantly, and this guy just gets plowed into a wall of booze breath. And the second the man clocked that Cain was just a kid, he snapped at the G-rank rookie to stop standing around daydreaming. Cain shot back an apology. He's trapped in the curse, fuming because it's not G-rank at all. He's stuck as an A rank. Yeah, it's no shock. Adventure registration kicks off at 12, and everyone starts at G-rank, so when he was an A rank, they handed him a gold card. Turns out, it's basically unheard of for a brand new adventurer to already hold a rank, yet everything that's happened lately makes it feel totally possible. The moment Cain got registered, the receptionist and the guildmaster laughed it off, insisting a G-rank could never take down goblins or that green lizard, but two people vouched for him hard, saying he'd saved the princess and the duke's daughter when he was just 10. And just like that, the mix-up got wiped clean. Then the guildmaster in the capital handed him a special upgrade straight to A rank. No one wants to chase pointless trouble, because it doesn't just mess with you, it brings trouble to the guild, too. He stared at the board and spotted a training request begging him to level up, because it was just waiting to be answered. That rank was the only one with access, masters who could wield magic and crush with physical combat, and he'd always dreamed of helping train the new guild members. So he decided to go for it, then shoved his request paper into the receptionist's hands. He flipped it open and realized this wasn't some random book at all. It was a training guide meant to be used out in the forest. She promised the kid she'd reach the client and come back in a flash with every detail. He could barely contain his excitement for this quest. The receptionist kept warning him more and more adventurers were flooding in, and the rush was only growing. He dug into the numbers, and then bam, a few of them just vanished out of nowhere. Kane thought they might have slipped into another town, or even botched the quest, and figured it'd be okay, but then some of them vanished the moment they accepted the request, and that's when her worry slammed into overdrive. Maybe she was just overthinking it, so she told the kid to be careful, because his life was too precious to gamble with. Before Kane got reincarnated, he couldn't help but soak up the wonder of light novel worlds. He thought chasing swords and magic would be a walk in the park, but the truth hit hard: adventuring is brutal, and people drop dead left and right. Yeah, the missing adventurers are freaking worrying, but he can't wait to dive into the new quest, so he's left wondering if that trainee is a newbie noble or just a brand new adventurer who registered yesterday. But after days of waiting, the moment finally crashed onto the calendar. He couldn't believe it. There they were, Millie and Nina. When he was just 5, these private tutors stayed by his side for 3 whole years. Back then, since he barely ever left the estate, they hauled him out to the territory's capital and shoved him into a crash course, teaching him all sorts of things. They last crossed paths during the monster forest outbreak, and back then, Kane was straight-up legendary. They cling to him and stare in shock because the 3-inch sword is gone now. He's grown just a little. Kane couldn't shake the thought, was he even qualified to train them, when they'd already racked up way more adventuring experience than he ever had. They clung to him even tighter as they snapped, "Sensei." And just like that, I swear this whole moment proves life really is a wheel. Some days you're riding high, and the next thing you know you're dropped to the bottom. You know what I mean. Alright, let me reintroduce our main character, Kane von Silford, a 12-year-old kid who's already a rookie adventurer. The gods loved him to the bone, and he walked around wrapped in ridiculous divine protection. He's an apostle of the gods with zero restraint in his soul, and that wild lack of limits is exactly the adventurer he is. Right as they were about to kick off training, a man was crouched behind the tree, watching their every move. Millie kicked off training by sprinting in and swinging her sword like a storm, but Kane totally shut down her assault with ruthless, effortless counters. Nina whipped her magic into motion, but Kane nimbly slipped out of the way like it never even touched him. After weeks of grinding training, they finally throw in the towel and call it a day. While Kane tore into them with brutal honesty, Millie lagged half a beat on the left side attacks, yet Nina found a massive opening the moment her chanting hit. He couldn't stop wondering, could they cut down her chant and make it quicker? But Kane was the lone genius who could throw chantless magic. Millie was drowning in frustration because not a single punch would land, no matter what she did, and even with God's blessing, Kane was just on a whole different level. She couldn't help but ask, why are you only an A rank? They were ranking him like he didn't deserve an S rank, even though his power screams it, and on top of that, he's been able to cast chantless magic since he was a kid, going so far as to craft a national treasure-class magic bag. Millie waved them off and swore she'd do her best every single day, and Kane admitted he might show up late tomorrow because he was still stuck studying at school. They were so focused on everything else that they almost completely missed it. He was only 12 years old, and the academy still demanded he show up. Yet even so, he's already got a title, and he's the one running his whole household. Inside the Royal Academy. Tell me, Silk, don't stop calling his name. Kane shot them an apology for overthinking and then leaned in, asking what their subject was. In today's lecture, a part of it confused Silk, so she raised her hand to ask about it, while Tellus looked jittery, glancing around as he checked if he was okay. He was doing just fine. He was stuck in his head, hunting for a brand new game or a fresh kind of entertainment to invent. And speaking of that, Tellus jumped into the reverse game Kane had played with his father, and man, it was insanely good. Spill it, who's this country's princess, and why does Silk mean everything? Because she's the Duke's daughter. They were both his classmates at the academy, and they were his fiancés. At 10 years old, a brutal horde of orcs tore into them. Then Kane stepped in and saved the day, and that single moment sparked their whole engagement. In this world, polygamy is totally normal, and besides those 2 girls, he's got a third fiancée waiting in the wings too. Silk couldn't wait to test his prototype the moment he was finished, and he gave the plan a quick, solid nod. Jealous rage burst in the princess. She slammed the desk and blurted, in full embarrassment, that she wanted to play with them too. Yeah, of course, both of them got invited. Lately, he's been looking worn out, so they step in and tell him to go easy instead of overdoing it. After the final bell, he slipped into his adventure gear and headed straight for the guild. Standing before the quest board, it hit him. After school, he always picked up adventure requests and cooked up new inventions, yet somehow, not even once, did fatigue come for him. He heard a party erupt in curses because one of their own had bolted. But the girl snapped back and said he was completely gone, nowhere, not a trace. Lesha, the receptionist, shot him an apology as he'd kept waiting. Then he thrust a bag into her hands, a delivery meant for his regular guest, and he stared into the emptiness, wondering what could have happened, because if he remembered that talk about the missing adventurers, then it looked like another one had vanished again, and the people who'd come with him for the request were left totally baffled. If more than one person starts disappearing, Kane figures the guild must have already gotten a clue. Lesha agrees. He warned him to stay sharp as he strode on, haunted by the adventurers who disappeared without a whisper. He spotted Millie in the alley, bleeding and hurt, and when she saw him, relief crashed over her like a wave. And slammed the news on him. Nina had been taken. Kane patched her up and grilled her on everything that went down. When Millie finally stumbled into the training grounds late, she spotted Nina ringed by a bunch of rough, bandit-looking troublemakers. Nina stormed off to meditate by herself, and Millie instantly regretted letting her go. So now the big question is why they're hunting Nina. It's because they're after that magic bag he made, the kind of national treasure quality that nobody can ignore. And somehow, only a tiny handful of people even know those bags exist. But lately, multiple adventurers have been vanishing, and the missing ones keep piling up. Kane couldn't stop wondering if Nina had slipped into their ranks, because Millie didn't just call it a theft. She felt Nina was tangled up in those disappearances, the same dark force. Then the real question hit him. Why are they hunting adventurers? Kane had no clue, and instead of anyone else, he tore himself apart for blowing off Lydia's warning. Millie snatched his hand and dragged it over her shoulder, grinding it in like she was trying to make him feel it. They uncovered the brutal truth. Nina's magic was what carved those wounds into her. Nina knew exactly why she was there back then, and she already had the whole plan locked in. She mutters a few words, then it hits. That's what they call it. Even though Millie never said a word, she could read the lips perfectly, because she and her partner had been in sync for years. But he kept hesitating, couldn't dodge in time, and her blows landed hard, leaving him injured. Kane thrust out his hand and swore they'd charge in to rescue Nina. They stormed into the forest, and the moment they spotted a bloodstain, everything changed. Millie figured it had to be Nina's. Kane fired up his search ability, and his eyes widened when he realized time had already swallowed it, meaning they might not be nearby anymore. He pointed to the footprints and urged them to hunt through the surroundings. They tore through every corner, scanning the area like their lives depended on it. Millie's brain went into overdrive when Nina fired right at her, and Kane's mind kept spiraling too. After all, he'd spotted those traces earlier. And with that it clicks, Nina's shooting straight at Millie to carve her a way out, or maybe it's something else entirely, a secret only Nina could possibly know. They spotted a pouch lying on the ground, and she confirmed it was the magic pouch Kane gave her, so they're sure this has to be Nina's clue. Because if anybody other than the three of them tries to haul it, the arm can twist out of control. It's built to dump every ounce of the contents, weight straight onto them. The kidnapper had no clue Millie was watching, because if they'd known, they would have grabbed her too. So Kane straight up concluded they never realized someone was hunting them, and he was sure they barreled toward the spot where that pouch had been taken. They're heading that way and firing up their search power to dig up every last detail. About how the bandits finally snapped and turned to kidnapping. Millie guessed it had to be because Nina was an elf. The Liebert territory, home to elves, used to be feared for one thing: kidnappers snatching people left and right. So yeah, it's not impossible, but they still can't confirm whether every missing adventurer was an elf. They press on with the hunt until the trail slams to a stop at the cliff. Kane snaps his search ability on, and suddenly everything feels within reach. Then he clocks a signal 2 kilometers ahead, spots a bunch of humans there, and figures it could be their hideout, so he grabs her and rockets through the air toward the spot. Hoping Nina was safe, he pushed deeper into a cabin hidden in the heart of the forest. While Nina was bound and helpless, the kidnapper laughed to himself. An elf like her would sell for a fortune, and she wasn't the only prize either. They'd snatched a bunch of humans too. The creep brushed her face and promised himself a first little taste. But his comrades snapped that he couldn't wreck their goods, so Nina whipped her head around, shaking. She remembered the signal word she'd told Millie, call, and she could tell Millie clocked it, wondering whether she'd actually managed to reunite with Kane and if Millie was still hurt. Right then, the other two had already rolled up on the scene and spotted the bandits. Kane whipped out his water orb and trapped them like it was instant magic. Then he flips on his search ability, There are around 14 people inside, and 6 of them are clustered deep at the back. Kane can feel Nina's magic in the air, and he's dead sure she's one of them. He plots a diversion, but Millie refuses. She wants to handle it herself. She'll bait the bandits while Kane uses his search power to track them down and save them, healing everyone he finds. As the bandits huddle and plot how they'll slip out of the capital tonight, one of their guys shouts that the stables are blazing. Bandits trail behind him, hell-bent on putting out the fire. But one of them halts cold the moment they spot Kane shushing the captured. Before Kane could even warn the others, he shot forward and clamped his voice shut, right before the rest of the sentence could finish. By smashing him to the ground, this bandit can't get back up for a while because a few of his bones snapped and shattered. Kane finally untied Nina, then tore into a real apology for keeping her waiting. He tells her Millie cooked up a distraction outside, then called everyone out to the front. Nina grabbed him and ordered him to head straight to Millie, because if they dragged their feet, she'd get hurt. Because he used to be an A-rank adventurer, and Millie couldn't take him down by herself. That's why she signals Millie to grab him. It grabs him by the pulse and shoves him to move, right now. Kane clocked the whole situation, and panic clawed at him as he worried about Millie. Speaking of Millie, she was going full rage mode, smashing the kidnappers and scrubbing every bit of their ugliness out of the situation. And couldn't stop thinking, did Kane actually pull Nina out in time? She demanded answers about why they were kidnapping adventurers, and the truth hit her like a slap. These villains weren't stealing for fun. They were selling them to anyone craving cheap labor. Thinking nobody would even blink if a drifter adventurer vanished out of nowhere, then treating women like they were only good for other jobs. The bandits lock onto her cute face and instantly guess she's here to save someone. Then they smirk, knowing she'll end up sold off too. And it'll turn into a tiny toy for him. As the idiots swarmed in to grab her, Millie shut her eyes tight and let Kane's training crash back into her mind. She snagged it, somehow it was already hers. She cut down the bandits one by one, then smirked and said sparring with Kane was still way harder than this. She jerks back when she senses it coming, then slips out of the way, but the moment she spun around, a brutal kick landed, hard, sending her crashing down on her knees. Kane burst in, panic in his voice, and shouted Millie's name like he feared she might vanish. Bandits blinked in shock when they spotted a kid creeping around the area, but then Kane flipped on body enhancement and, in a blink, appeared right beside Millie. He healed her and told her, straight to her face, that Nina and everyone else were safe and sound. He meant to take over from there, but Millie refused to back down and decided to finish it herself. She lunged in with her sword swinging, but the bandana guy snapped up his guard and shut her down. Millie shoved harder, pouring every last bit of power into it. Then he kicked that ugliness so hard it slapped the floor like a broom, cleaning up his mess in one brutal hit. He threw out a desperate plea for help, but his comrade just huffed and muttered, disgusted that the rats had crashed the party again. With a sudden blur, the hooded man popped up by Millie and slashed in with his dagger. But Kane snapped into motion and slammed himself in the way. The hooded man finally clocked that this kid wasn't normal, but Kane was already convinced. This was the A-rank adventurer Nina talked about. A former A-rank adventurer, exactly that. Then Nina showed up, and the hooded man sneered, clicked his tongue and, before hurling his dagger and sprinting off toward, Nina lunges forward, while Kane twists out of the way and swats every dagger that comes his way. Nina fights to keep her breathing steady as she hurls her chance into the magic. The hooded guy lined in with a ruthless plan, turn her into his hostage. But Nina shot her fireball off just in time, scorching the hooded man's ugliness to ashes. He snarled a curse at them for stealing the moment, spat Nina, die, and Kane felt that same burning dread in his gut just before he was reborn. He clocked that the hooded man wore the exact same expression as the one who murdered him. Rage surged through him, and without meaning to, he blasted a terrifying fireball into existence. Nina lunged to stop him, but the moment was already gone. He couldn't hold it back a second longer, and in one brutal sweep, he wiped the entire forest off the map. Damn it, he went and pulled the same stunt again. After that, they dragged the kidnappers straight to the guild, and suddenly the whole case of adventurers getting hunted became official guild business. Then later, they realized the culprit wasn't some nobody. It was a massive organization. As for Kane, the king and his own people tore into him with a brutal scolding, and now he's stuck under strict house arrest. First, the second Millie and Nina showed up to see him. He bowed his head and apologized for not finishing the request they handed him. Then the two nodded, fully understanding his mess, and laid out why they'd come in the first place. After Nina thanked him for saving her, they both leaned in at the same time and kissed his cheeks. Blushing like I just scratched my itch away, Kane remembers it happened the same way when he was 8, only now he's 12, and Millie jumps in, confirms it, then measures it. He's the wielder of 5-inch swords now. So yeah, they're planning to stick around the capital for a while, but the moment a fresh quest drops, they're gone and heading out again. Kane shot out his hand and promised her, if anything comes up, I'd love to jump in and join you guys again. Staring at Kane's grin, Millie suddenly realized this wasn't the same kid he used to be when he was 8. Then he shot for his hand, nodding along like there was no turning back. Only if they finally lifted his suspension. At the Royal Academy, Silk pulled Kane aside, invited him to her place, and begged him to play reversey, but our boy had other plans after school. A full week has crawled by since they slapped him with probation, and today, right now, he finally got the green light. He stormed into the forest and rebuilt the wild world, bringing every creature back to its natural way of life. Now it was finally over. He just had to fix the cabin, so he fires up the full repair system, seals up every broken structure, and blasts through the cleaning until the whole place is spotless. In just a few heartbeats, it was over. Even if Kane would trash this cabin, or someone else would steal it later, he couldn't shake the feeling that the place had started with a real owner once. He sank into a rocking chair, and for some reason, a calm so strange washed over him. Since he got reincarnated, every single day in this world has been chaos, and he's barely caught a single quiet, peaceful breath like this. He slumped down and fell into sleep, and then, when he saw it, everything clicked. A lone silhouette of a girl flashed in the light, and he thrust out his hand, calling, Lady Sylvia. Then the moment she asked who he was, he snapped his eyes open and demanded to know who she was. That girl is Rachel, the owner of this house. Then somehow he wound up at her table, sharing tea and taking slow sips like the world had gone quiet. After he explained everything about the house and how he'd repaired it, Rachel shot him a grateful smile and thanked him. Kane blurted out an apology for messing around in her place, then somehow crashed and fell asleep too. Rachel normally stays in the royal capital, so this place has been abandoned for ages. Then the rain kept hammering down for days, and she couldn't stop worrying about leaks until she finally saw it spotless and demanded, "Did you clean it?" She thanked him for looking after it, and she just knew her dad would be thrilled too. When she was little, her mom died, and her dad shouldered everything alone, until a little over a year ago, he finally fell sick. They weren't exactly rolling in money, so this grave looked kind of underwhelming. After her dad died, she clawed for survival, taking every job she could in the capital, day after day, until she could finally build a real grave fit for him. But she's saved not a single coin. Every job she takes pays a joke, and living in the capital drains her bank account even worse. And just like that, she grabbed the stones herself, hustled off, and returned with them in hand. After all, rocks in the mountains are free, so Kane's left with one burning question. So she can barely even slice a stone. What's the plan, exactly? How is she supposed to haul back a grave-sized boulder all by herself? Blushing with embarrassment, Rachel slaps her hands over her face, mortified at her own mistake, because after she'd already helped our boy so much, he stepped up and offered to help her too. Honestly, he could just whip up one with creation magic, but the idea gnaws at him. It just feels wrong. They set off on foot and immediately pepper her with questions. Do you have any idea where we can find the stones? She handed him the necklace her mom left behind, then revealed the crazy truth. Her mom had gotten it from her dad all the way back when she was just a kid. That rare stone didn't just shine, it sparkled different depending on the angle. Her dad, a hunter, chased prey up the mountain, slipped inside a cave, and boom, found it there. Her dad was tough as nails, but illness still crushed him, so when she started to slump and get gloomy, Kane snapped her name to bring her back. Rachel snapped back into her bright smile and kept talking, because back then, her mom treated that stone like gold, swearing it was magic that could grant wishes. Rachel was just a kid, so she ate every word. Then her mom died, and Rachel climbed that mountain with one desperate goal, find more of that stone and wish her mom back to life. She couldn't even make it down that cliff that day, but thank the stars, her dad spotted her and hauled her safely back home. That's how she already knew exactly where to hunt down the stone they needed. With that decided, they hauled themselves up the mountain, got jumped by goblins along the way, and then crossed over a ladder to keep going. Right after that, Rachel looked totally wiped out, so Kane suggested they take a breather, but she shot the idea down and refused. She's convinced they're finally close now. Right as she was about to reach the cliff, Kane snapped at her to watch her step. Rain had been falling and the ground was slick. She was just about to tell him, "I know." He suddenly slipped and crashed to the ground. She swallowed her fate and even apologized for dragging Kane around with someone as useless as her. Then Kane suddenly lunged in and jumped to save her. She couldn't believe it. Both of them were literally floating in the air. She froze when he told her they were about to fly down. She snapped her head side to side, wondering if Kane was born to break hearts. As they finally touched down, one shaky step at a time, Kane demanded she check a very specific, a spot where you could see the cave looming right there. They storm up to the cave entrance, then slam the brakes before they even step inside. Kane told her to hold up for a second. He'd dash into the cave first and scout it. He fired up his search ability, and right away, he sensed something terrifying out there, like a monster stalking nearby. He shoved his way in first, ready to handle the monster himself. He wonders if Rachel might want to tag along, but when she doesn't, relief hits him hard, because being alone would make everything so much easier. He launched a storm of icicles like a weapon, hurling them down hard toward. He charged at the spiders and froze them in place. Right as he shoved the crucial piece into his magic bag, something felt wildly off, like the air itself had gone strange. Something's lining up right there next to the spiders, like it's waiting its turn in a silent queue. Rachel burst in, screaming his name as her admirers closed in on her heels. He took one look around and knew this was the goblin nest. Then he readied his vacuum blade, ready to tear the next second apart. He barked at Rachel to get down, and she hit the ground face first without a second thought. He hurled the blade at the enemies, then drove it with perfect control, slamming them all into place in no time flat. He spun to Rachel and demanded, "Are you okay?" She looks totally fine, but he was totally rattled because he never saw the monster returning. Out of nowhere, a spider lunged at her, and she slapped it out of the air with a stone. After wiping out the final monster, Kane burst out, totally stunned by what just happened. She revealed just how strong she really was. Yeah, her father drilled this into her. Use every last thing you've got to stay alive. Strike first, or you'll get hit. She stared hard at the stone clutched in her hands. Now check it, this is the exact same stone as the pendant, which means the real source isn't near the surface at all. It's buried way deeper inside the cave. He snapped the light ball on, blasting the whole area into full view. And his jaw dropped at the treasures they kept pulling from the ground. Earlier it was pitch dark, so they never spotted it, so he leaned in and asked the girl, "Is this the right place?" Rachel swallowed her pride, apologized for acting childish, and confessed she still believed in that childish legend, because deep down, she couldn't stop hoping she'd finally get to meet her dad. As she snapped into action and started scooping up the stones, Kane dove into his creative magic for the very first time, even though he had no idea what he was getting into. He ignited creative magic and merged it with memory projecting. A thick fog rolled in, swallowing the whole place inch by inch. A lone man's silhouette suddenly cut through the darkness. Rachel's face twists in confusion when she asks if it was her dad, and Kane feels his plan collapsing. In his head, he's already realizing it. Without an image of her father, this won't work. A real photo is out, sure, but if he can't get that, then at least a portrait would save the day. To his absolute shock, the projectile that came flying at him. He'd built it all just to reveal the wild truth. Turns out, it was her dad. Totally nothing like what he'd pictured in his head. Rachel let out a shaky laugh through her tears, finally convinced her mom had been right all along. She tried to reach her dad and blurted out how much she missed him ever since he vanished, but these days she's holding it together, living calm and steady. Though work keeps beating her down and pushing her back over and over still, she fights through it, and every step she takes she leans on everything he taught her. Someday she dreams of becoming him and helping people, so she begged him to watch over her from heaven with her mom. Now she's going to be okay, and she's doing great. Right after that, they teleported straight to her place in the blink of an eye, and it blew her mind. Kane asked if she'd really be okay by herself and offered to help her the next day, but Rachel just smiled, said she was fine, and turned down his offer. She flashes him a grateful look, then declares, "My turn now," and vows to give it everything. We'll raise a huge statue and sing praises to Kane for the adventure. And just like that, they said their goodbyes and went their separate ways. And in the end, Kane can't help it. He's got one burning question about that whole phenomenon, and can't stop wondering if Rachel's feelings somehow sparked a miracle. Butler Ronald pushed, asking what was wrong, and he waved it off. "It's nothing," and promised they'd swing by his father and the others tomorrow. The very next day, Kane shoved a gift into the hands of his two fiancées, and the moment they opened it, their faces lit up like he'd hit the jackpot. After a while, Kane stormed into the guild and found Eden waiting with a personal request just for him. guild master of the Adventurers Guild at the Royal Capital Branch. Eden's alchemist friend is begging them to hunt a medicinal herb that's been spotted only twice, once 200 years ago, and again 100 years ago, found near the Western Lake the first time and deep inside the monster forest the second, because this thing is insanely rare. It's only a search request, not some big collection, so as long as Kane goes hunting for it, that's fine. Honestly, this feels less like work and more like an excuse to send Kane all the way to the Western Lake. He had made the request, and there was no way he thought Kane would actually track down that herb. Still, he was clinging to hope that Kane would step in and handle that girl. Talking about that girl, she's his third fiancée, Tafana. When she spotted him at the Western Lake, Tafana wasted no time. She rushed over and wrapped him in a tight hug. Yeah, she's his third fiancée, the Duke's daughter from the Liberty territory, and she also serves as a captain of the Royal Knights in the Kingdom of Escort. Tafana suddenly found a rare pocket of free time, so she went straight to her brother, and she was relieved it worked out. Kane tried to tell her she didn't need to bother Eden, but Tafana snapped back that they were both swamped and barely saw each other, plus their engagement was still a total secret. And yeah, if the Knight Captain and Baron Kane, the hero, got spotted dating in the middle of town, it would spark a full-on scene. But they weren't holding back, they were determined to go all out, and Kane had zero clue what that actually meant. But it all clicked the moment she drew her sword. And she admitted she'd been counting the days, dying to train with him. Kane gripped the real sword and pulled it tight, ready for whatever came next, and snapped his body enhancement into full power. As their blades collide, Tafana totally expected her darling to move this fast, and then Kane shot back that she hit even harder than last time. As their blades snapped together once more. Like always with her darling, every step hits perfectly, no pauses, no openings, and not a single wasted move. What she was really saying was that he'd grown even stronger than the version of him from back then. She was thrilled, no doubt about it, but yeah, it still pinches her heart a little. She's been crushing mission after mission and grinding through brutal training just to catch up to him. Kane whipped through the air, flipping like a blur, and he snapped his sword down at her, but Tafana surged in and blocked, then her blade got cleaved clean in half. He launched himself and plunged straight into the water. After a beat, Kane leaned in and started chatting with his master. Escort's former king and the creator god himself, Uyatera Hersu Escort. Yeah, it's a mouthful, so let's just call him Yuya. Kane spilled how he'd shattered Tafana's sword and admitted he couldn't stop worrying, despite the fact that she'd told him to let it go. He tried to repair it, but no matter what he did, it just wouldn't budge, like it was fighting back. And honestly, that's proof the feelings behind it run way too deep. Some things aren't meant to be fixed that easily. So what's Kane's real game here? Did he just roll into sulk and mope for fun? Nope, he's on a guild mission to hunt a rare herb, and he's betting Yuya might know exactly where it is. After dragging out the whole saga, he finally spilled everything to his master. Kane couldn't shake the worry over Tafana. He knew he'd never truly replace the old one, but he was already planning to surprise her with a brand new sword as a gift. He just needed to end the date the right way, then make her smile shine again. The master grinned and ruffled his hair, and you could feel the relief pouring out, because Kane didn't fall for the same choice his dad did. And he jumped at the chance to help by forging her a brand new sword. All right, with that said, Kane's going to roam around this place and scout the area while we wait. But tell me this, where is he really right now? He's not just sitting in the Escort kingdom, is he? The translation says he's in Fabinil, a world where you can stay for a full year and only a single day slips by in the real world. He trained there for about 5 years, meaning he's only missed 5 days back in reality. And listen, there's a monster in that place that churns out the purest mithril straight inside its body, and Yuya is pushing Kane to go grab it, because they're going to use it to forge the sword. He's pretty sure that herb his student was hunting wasn't just nearby, it was right there in that exact area. And I told him, don't worry, with his current strength, he'll be back in about 2 months. Then Kane kicked off his journey, obsessing over one thing, where in the world the answer he was hunting would be hiding. It's been a whole month, and he's been tearing through every corner, searching nonstop. But even now, he's still hunting a monster that matches that exact description, yet none have surfaced. If he drags his feet too long, folks will start panicking again, like he disappeared for another 5 days. He started worrying his master memory was slipping, because get this, Yuya had been alive for a whopping 110,000 years. Suddenly, the ground buckled like an earthquake had ripped through the world. He soared overhead, scanning the sky, desperate to spot what it was. Realized the mountain wasn't standing still, it was creeping forward like it had a pulse. Honestly, it wasn't going anywhere, because the thing he'd just spotted was a giant turtle. The mountains around them are getting swallowed whole, and everything in sight is getting chewed up and erased. He replayed the clue his master had slipped him, like it was burned into his mind. The monster he had to hunt moved at a snail's pace, but once it locked in, it was brutally hard to bring down. With that, he was sure, this time, the target was finally within his sights. If he beats that turtle, he'll score high-purity mithril, but here's the catch. The monster is freakishly tough, and just staring at it, Kane already knows this fight is going to be brutal. He shot his hand up to trigger the flame sanctuary, and then the saint's sanctuary followed. Then he hurled it straight at the colossal monster, unleashing a massive explosion that tore the air apart. He thought he'd finally beaten it for good, but it only managed a tiny hairline crack, barely any damage at all. He unleashes every kind of magic he's got, but no matter what he does, nothing even so much as budges. 3 days in, Kane was ripping into curses, spiraling over the same question. How on earth was he going to pry the ore out from inside that monster? A wild idea struck him. He had to get inside the turtle. He remembered how his master refused to drop extra hints, saying it'd kill the fun if everything got spelled out, so he marched up to the turtle, and the moment it opened its mouth, he slammed open his mouth and shot inside like a bullet. He couldn't believe it. He actually crawled inside the turtle and hunted for the ore, and from far away, he spotted something glittering like it was calling his name. And just like that, he got yanked through space and landed in a stunning, breathtaking paradise. It felt like a whole living ecosystem, fully built out and bursting with life, like it had been perfectly crafted. The sky blazed so hard he couldn't help but stare. Was it glowing with some kind of magic? He stared in awe and couldn't deny it. This world still had so much left to show him, and he had no clue. He's like, this is crazy, and once he finally has the time, he's sprinting back to dig deeper, because he just realized he stepped on something. He snapped his head around and found an enraged caterpillar glaring right at him, and then he scrambled to apologize. The monster lunged at him, leaving him no choice. He ripped his sword from the magic box and fought back. And he slammed into that monster. He's got to track down that ore before everything gets even more unbearable. But when he spun around, a roaring horde of caterpillars surged in, ready to tear into him. In a blink, he unleashed infernal earth and blasted that adorable monster back into oblivion. More and more monsters kept bursting into the scene. So he had no choice. He bolted, yelling that he had to get out of there and make it back home. This is a total nightmare. He's got to grab that ore fast, but life keeps throwing obstacle after obstacle in his way. Should he just wipe them all out at once? No, no way. That could blow everything up and cause even more trouble. So what now? What's he supposed to do? Then he spots a cliff straight ahead. He snapped his head up and fired up his flying power. Right as he geared up to search from above, a bird suddenly lunged for him. Mistake him for a caterpillar. Even with everything going wrong, Kane couldn't believe it. The turtle seemed to be packed with all kinds of creatures inside. He swallowed his pride and apologized to the bird. Before he landed the knockout blow, the scene snaps over, and now he's rolling with creature comrades, including the one named Haku. Haku and Jin, he grabbed those two and pleaded, "Help me track down the ore." And then he slammed to a stop where the plant stood, staring at them like, "Is this it? Is this the herb Eden he told me to find?" After a while, Kane dropped to his knees on the ground, scavenged everywhere for the ore, and still came up empty. Then he slumped onto Haku's body, staring up and counting the days in his head, wondering how long he'd been trapped inside that turtle. He couldn't stop smiling as the memory hit. Unseen plants, unknown creatures, all living inside the turtle's body, and the whole place felt weirdly dim, like it was softly glowing from within. And then it hit him hard. He whipped his gaze upward, and the second he spotted what was there, he shot into the air like a rocket, and if this is high-purity mithril, the magic trapped inside has to be absolutely unreal. Finally, he stumbled on the exact thing he'd been hunting for. He's convinced the ore's magical energy is what's lighting up the inside of the turtle's body. Then he starts snagging a killer haul, one prize at a time. As soon as he figures it out, each crystal becomes a fresh spark, feeding light straight into the ore. Kane scans the entire place, then stops dead in his tracks, like something's about to go terribly wrong. Just as he swore he'd take this one shot and vanish, Yuya watched him from the shadows with a sly smile, muttering that he was overthinking everything. Then Kane hit his teleportation magic. Racing back to his master's mansion, he burst through the door and greeted him. Then with a smug little irritation, he grumbled to his master that he never said it was a turtle, only for Yuya to crack up and promise to brew him some coffee before he leaned in and asked if he'd finally found it. Kane shot back, yes, and then held up the crystal for him to see. All he could do was return with this, and then slam the question into his master's hands. Would it finally be enough? Yeu fires back, yes, and tells him he can forge a masterpiece from it. Kane's stomach clenched. If his master went all out, that blade could level up to a global-class sword. Yuya told him, I've got this, I just need Kane to help me put it all together. With the crystal set dead center of the magic circle, Yuya leaned in and shot Kane a question. You ready, Kane? Kane didn't see this coming at all. He figured it would feel just like blacksmithing, and Yuya nodded, saying it was fine, but warned him it would take time. It was basically like creation magic. Yuya told him to pour in a little mana and picture the exact sword he wanted to forge. The student nods along and snaps to it, drawing out the plan with every last detail. He yanks out the sword he's desperate to craft for Tafana. They forged a gorgeous sword with their own hands. Even though it wasn't as legendary as the sword Yuya handed to Kane, he still tuned it, sharpening and shaping it to match the wielder's power. Then he hurled the sheath straight at the kid. Kane thanked his master, praying Tafano would love this gift. So yeah, this is as far as Yuya can push, and after that, everything hangs on Kane. Meanwhile, Tafana looked like he was about to explode with something. She looked like she was lost in deep thought, and when night finally rolled in, she let out a heavy sigh. They couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Kane stormed in and greeted Dame, the vice captain, and Dame shot back a greeting, practically exhaling in relief, because lately their captain had been feeling miserable. He thinks Kane might lift her spirits with a sparring session, but the kid just smirks and chuckles at the whole plan. Tafana's panic erupted the moment Kane closed in and questioned why he'd show up out of nowhere. Kane only wanted to apologize for what went down last time and show her a gift, but Tafana shut it down fast. None of it was his fault. She just admitted she was too weak. She couldn't stand how pathetic she felt for dragging him into her worry, too. To her shock, Kane shoved a brand new sword into her hands. It might not match her old blade, but he's begging her to take a swing anyway. Tafana yanked her sword free, and she couldn't tell if that strange rush came from seeing her darling or from the blade itself. When Kane admitted he only helped a tiny bit with forging the sword, Tafana nearly burst with embarrassment. Kane looked at her and saw a gloomy cloud hanging over her, so he promised her he'd spar with her now, and then until she got used to it. Tafana turned to Maydared and blurted out that she was honestly, insanely happy. Out of nowhere, the night itself hit them with the worst news. Yeah, they were in trouble because a massive pack of monsters was blocking the road ahead. They burst outside and spotted a whole pack of lizards crawling around. Kane stepped in to help, but Tafana waved it off, saying it was their mission, then demanded that Kane heal the wounded. She ripped her sword free and made it crystal clear she wasn't afraid to use it on him. Then she ordered Squad 3 to lock in on one job, protect Lord Kane and keep the wounded safe, while the rest of the knights surged out to wipe the monsters clean. While Kane was tending the wounded, he couldn't help but stare at his darling in awe, because she wasn't just a knight captain, she was. And she's not just any fighter, she's a swordswoman with a fearless heart, refined grace, and a beauty that stops you cold. Tafana snapped to her comrade to back up, then slashed her sword straight at the enemy. Me, staring at her darling's smile like it just lit up the whole room. Tafana grinned at him and declared, with pure confidence, that they'd pulled it off. Back in the Royal Capital Guild, Eden grabs Kane's attention, pours out gratitude, and slams the brakes on his guilt with a heartfelt apology for everything. He leaned in and told Kane, Tafana might play it tough, but she's actually way more delicate than you think. And yeah, she's smiling so hard it's obvious, because I heard she's been tending that sword every single night, way past bedtime. Kane lit up at the news and immediately passed him the exact item he asked for. Eden was left completely stunned, because he'd actually nailed the impossible quest, and he rushed to thank him for all that brutal hard work. When Kane walked out, Eden finally got it. She understood why her sister had picked him. Kane was the kind of young man who pulled you in the second you met him. And he couldn't wait for what was coming next. At the Royal Academy, where the air felt electric and trouble was always one bell away. Kane's two fiancées just stared at him like they'd gone numb, so he leaned in and demanded, "What's wrong?" Silk heard what went down with Tafana the other day, so Kane stepped in and took the blame. He was the one who broke it. But when he looked at the two, their faces said they were still totally lost. He couldn't shake the feeling it wasn't really about the sword, and then he heard they went on a date by a beautiful lake. Then they climbed onto the horses and rode together for what felt like forever. Silk knew Tafana was his fiancée, so it didn't faze him, but she couldn't stop the jealous sting. She just wanted to slip in some quiet tea time with him and catch up for a little while. Meanwhile, Tellus decides she wants sweet, beautiful dates with him too, because it hits her that all this time he's been burying himself in adventurous work. Kane shot the two of them an apology, then proposed they steal a date during the next break. As the idea hits him, he starts mapping out the perfect place to take both of them on a date. He runs right into Palma out of nowhere and blurts out an apology on the spot. They dropped onto a bench and he apologized again for knocking into her, right after he zoned out for a split second. Palma couldn't wrap her head around it, someone like him snapping like that. She figured he must have been buried in work lately. Kane shook his head, told her it wasn't like that, and then grilled her for ideas about something beautiful because he was hunting for inspiration. Palma looked totally baffled at first, but still answered that she absolutely adored the view from her window after the rain, when the whole town glitters like it's been polished by magic, and sometimes a rainbow slips right in. But it was only what she figured, and Kane still held the final say. Suddenly, petals drift down and kiss her hair, just as Kane reaches for it. He flashes back to a peaceful spot drenched in flowers, where the view feels straight out of a dream. When she suddenly saw him smile, Palma's gut flipped, like, was he really okay? Kane throws her a huge thanks, because her idea totally hit the jackpot. Days flew by, and it felt like our guy was cooking up something big the whole time. And it didn't escape the watchful eyes of his maids. The day they'd been waiting for finally crashed into reality. And when they finally reached his mansion, they bowed their heads and thanked him for the invite. Kane leaned in and toasted their looks with a real compliment. Then he headed straight for the backyard, the place where he'd already set everything up and ready for what came next. When the two finally reached the place, they froze, because the garden was ridiculously beautiful. But it wasn't that stunning thing he'd promised. They pushed inside. And right there, he revealed a breathtaking field, blanketed in pure white flowers. But that wasn't the whole story. Kane triggered the flower's memory with a snap of power. Then the room flared with light, bright and blinding, while a bunch of blue petals rained down and hit the ground. Once that place turned into a dreamy field of pale blue blossoms, it felt like Haku and Jin were floating them straight through the sky, and Jin and Haku being there made them both light up with joy. As they sank into their seats, Silk asked Kane if this flower field held some special meaning for him, because the way he smiled looked pure joy, and Kane agreed. He pointed at it and said, "I've seen this before back when I was still a kid, years ago." The smell of these flowers yanked him straight back to his childhood in this world. And on top of that, his childhood memories crashed back in from his original world, right when his dad asked him, "So, was it beautiful?" After a little while, the maid kept humming as the moment stretched on. The butler's colon signaled her, "Quiet," now before the whole room could explode into noise. Right before they hit their peak, the maid's face lit up as she finally saw. The kids were out cold, and you could feel the question burning. What kind of wild dream was Kane slipping into? At the guild, Kane got a bombshell of a request, an escort so noble it sent chills down his spine. So it was made just for him, to escort a noble in person. He stormed up to the noble mansion to get the whole story, every last detail, straight from the source. Only to get crushed, his dad personally demanded it, even though he could have simply reached out to his son. Rain told him Kane was slammed with work, and she swore this was the best play to keep her brother under control for a few days. With only a few days of escort duty on the clock, Kane couldn't shake the feeling they were headed somewhere big. Father got an invitation from his friend Sesta and decided to send Sarah and Reyna to Lindell, because he can't go himself after trouble erupted in the Grecia territory. Worried out of his mind, Kane rushed to ask, "Dad, are you okay?" Finally, his father ruffled his hair and said, "I'm fine." The day finally arrived, and inside the carriage, everything was about to change. Millie couldn't shake the unease as she climbed into the noble's carriage. Sarah told her to chill, because they weren't strangers at all. They were Kane's tutors back when he was just a kid. Kane nodded along with his mom and sister, and then admitted that it was his father who'd asked him to do it. Millie finally exhaled, letting all that tension melt away. But he couldn't stop staring. Why on earth was he riding a horse? So yeah, this time, they didn't just send him out. They officially signed him on as an adventurer. And he refused to let the girls fry in the sun. Rain spun to her brother and demanded to know if Lindell had some massive lake. Kane nodded and said the entire town is built right around that enormous water. Rain was buzzing with excitement, ready to dive into that water with her brother. Kane spotted someone up ahead, and the hairs on his neck stood up. Kane stormed up to the old man, and when he found out his wagon had broken down, everything changed. The kid stepped up and offered to fix it himself. He hit the material repair button and watched it mend on the spot instantly. The old man was overflowing with gratitude and begged to repay him, but Kane shot him down fast. He insisted it wasn't necessary. The old man handed him a handmade wooden horse he'd crafted ages ago, like a heartfelt thank you for everything he'd done. Kane shot him a thank you, and as the old man walked out, he burned them with a warning. If they were headed for Lindell, don't let their guard down. When the storm rolls in, the dead's sorrow comes back too. That last word burned in Kane's mind, and he couldn't stop wondering what it really meant. Then they pulled up to the Lindell, where a massive, beautiful lake stretches out in full view. In town, Rain couldn't stop grinning. This place was buzzing, and he was loving every second of it. They bolted to a mansion to dump their stuff and then saunter into town. After a brutal, bone-weary day, Kane flopped onto the bed, but sleep just wouldn't come. He's buzzing like a kid the night before a field trip. Honestly, he never saw this trip coming, but now that he's in it, it's turning out way better than he expected. Then out of nowhere, he caught a melody in the air, and then it bolted outside to hunt down where the sound was coming from, only to find nothing. He yanks on his adventurer gear and storms out, hunting down where it all came from. He burst onto the lake's edge, then the singing vanished into thin air. As he tried to convince himself it wasn't all in his head, a girl suddenly popped up right beside him. Morning broke, rain thundering down like an invitation, and it pulled her brother outside, right into the pool for a swim with her. Sarah warned them to stay close, and Rain nodded like, got it. She nearly drowned because she had zero idea how to swim. Big Bro slams his hand down and activates the creation spell, snapping a bubble into existence. And now, with that, your little sis can finally dive into the water and swim. Kane stared at the two and couldn't figure out why they weren't with Millie, and Millie immediately asked, is it really okay? Because they were supposed to be her bodyguards. Kane shrugged and told them it was all good. Sesta had already lined up the entire beach just for them. And honestly, they looked perfect side by side. So just to be safe, they'd better keep those magic pouches on them at all times. The two practically cheered at the offer and rushed to the water. Then a violent gust of wind slammed into them. Snatched Sarah's straw hat into the sky until the rain swooped in, caught it, and tossed it right back into her hands. Kane's mind snapped back to the girl from the night before. Then it all crashed back to him. He remembered everything, and once he realized she isn't alive, he blurted, is there something left undone that's trapping her here? She stared at him for a beat, then shook her head like she just couldn't believe it. When he finally asked whether that singing was coming from her, the girl burst into a beautiful, heartbreak-heavy song that pulled at everyone's chest. He felt it hit him out of nowhere. When he finally glanced at her, she shot a finger straight at the lake. A savage gust tore through the scene, and in an instant, the girl disappeared. While Rain was lost in his thoughts about the girl, he suddenly heard Kane, and Kane grilled him, asking if he was checking someone out now. Rain snapped back, denying it. He touched the truth, and boom, it wasn't some ordinary thing at all. It was a ghost. Then he spilled what happened, and little sister burst into a chuckle, teasing her brother for getting herself a girl ghost too. Mother Sarah lines in and demands to know his plan. And he answers that if that girl is still stuck there because she can't shake her lingering regrets, then he'll step in and help him. After some time, Kane realized he had no chance of this going smoothly. And he couldn't stop smiling because this request finally gave them the green light to step in and officially act. He trekked to the lake with Millie and Nina, then abruptly halted right in the middle. Millie stared at the place the ghost had talked about. Then Kane shot back that he'd already asked Sesta to let him dig through Lindell's records. Turns out, around this time of year, a brutal storm slams into Lindell, and the damage it leaves behind is downright terrifying. Nina snapped, so what does this ghost even have to do with all of this? Kane wasn't sure why, but something gnawed at him. Across the way from the town sat a tiny village, and while digging through old records, he stumbled on a ferry that once went down in a brutal storm on the trip there. It all kicked off the very next day after the town's festival, and since then, the ferry has been shut down every single season. Millie figured Kane was weighing the ghost girl as one of the victims from that incident, but Kane snapped back that they didn't have her name or anything else yet, so he said the only move was to start hunting down every lead they could. The real question is, how the heck are they supposed to search the whole lake? The records say that ferry vanished right around here. Now they've got to search for it on their own, because his idea wouldn't work. Even if they dove, they could only do so much. Kane slammed the blessing of water into motion and hurled it straight at them. With this, they'll finally swim through the ocean like it's nothing for hours, and they'll even be able to talk while they're underwater. Knowing she had the answer to it all, Millie vowed to zip her mouth from now on. They plunged underwater and tore into a full search, hunting for answers with no time to waste. After a while, they couldn't track it down anywhere. Kane suddenly realizes that digging through this lake's depths for a sunken ship from decades ago might be one step too far, even for him. With the magic fading fast, he told everyone to head back now and catch a breather. Out of nowhere, the water's current flipped direction, and everything changed in an instant. Everything shifted, and Kane couldn't even get a breath in. And when he finally opened his eyes, he realized he'd ended up with. Two of them stayed deep inside the cave. He finally let out a breath of relief. Turns out they weren't dead, just knocked out, so he cast his healing magic and nursed them back to life. When the two finally woke up, he rushed to apologize for missing it earlier, and Millie waved it off, saying she was totally fine, then asked him where they were heading. Kane leaned in and swore this had to be a cave, hiding somewhere under the lake. Kane stepped forward, and right away he realized if they got swept away into a place. And if that ferry was the one they were hunting, then she would be waiting right there too. He hurled a blazing light ball and right there, uncovered a drowned ferry, sunken and waiting. Ina demanded, "So what are we actually hunting for?" And for now, they were told to grab whatever looked important and carry it back. As the search kicked off, Kane couldn't shake the question, why had that girl shown up at all, and why on earth did she pick him? Right as the girl burst into existence, he couldn't stop wondering, was her wish really there, waiting in the dark? He seized the scattered wood and started digging through it, hunting for the exact thing she'd wished for. The ferry suddenly lurched hard, shaking everyone in its wake. He bolted outside to see what chaos was going on, only to stumble on two girls snared in legendary tentacles. When he spotted that giant octopus, Kane couldn't help but wonder, was this cave really its nest? Then it clicks, everything that drifts into this place gets turned into that octopus's next meal. He said he'd finally let those two out. But then the tiny octopus clung to his feet and yanked his focus clean away. He got a slap from their mom after they were tossed around like that. And even as everything dropped, he still flashed that calm smile like he'd planned it all. Then they bolted over and yanked the tent down to cut it fast. He lashed out with tentacles to tear free the two. Realizing the monster wasn't just surviving, it was healing and regenerating all over again. He realized that if this went on any longer, that whole cave could come crashing down any second. He ordered the two to stand their ground and stare down the little monsters, but realizing they weren't meant to last through a long, brutal brawl, he went straight for the kill, ending the mommy octopus with one single shot. With one brutal strike, the giant octopus was wiped out, sending the little monsters into full panic. Now that they'd gotten what they came for, he pushed them to head straight back to town. That day, a small earthquake rattled the Lindell region and sent tremors through the area. And yeah, right after that, he got absolutely roasted with a full-on scolding. With the founding festival right around the corner, the streets are jammed with people, and it floors Millie. While Nina and Kane were laughing as they checked every stall, Nina couldn't help wondering if Kane had finally tracked down what he came for. Speaking of Kane, he's already tracked down Mr. Morris, the man he'd been hunting for. So he shoved the wooden horse over to the old man, the one that came straight from Morna's place, and the old guy couldn't help but stare, stunned, asking where Kane even got it. Kane only shrugged and said Morna's feelings drew him to it. Morris leaned in and told us that ages ago, right when he was about Kane's age, he and Morna crafted this figurine together. He'd heard about the storm that swallowed the ferry, yet he kept clawing hope into his head, telling himself she'd find a way to survive. She lived in a village across the lake and only drifted into town every now and then, just acquaintances, barely that, yet he was crushed by her, and he still can't forget her smile. Even now, the moment it flashes in his mind, embarrassment hits him hard. Kane blurted out her song and tried to keep the tune going, then leaned in and asked the old man if he knew anything about it. The old man nodded and said it was the tune he'd picked up from a traveling merchant, then passed it to Morna, who could never land it, always messing it up. Then he broke into the song himself. Morna slammed into existence right above him, and the shock hit like lightning. Seeing the tears streaming down his face, Morna leaned in and told him, "Don't you dare cry." It always gnawed at her that she never mastered the song start to finish. Then Morris started singing, and the whole melody slammed back into her mind, along with her own name. She cups the old man's face with trembling tenderness. She finally thanked him, because now she could leave it all behind and truly move on. She spun toward Kane, pleading for one last goodbye, and Kane nodded. Then he cast the original magic to see her off. So she said goodbye to the two, thanked them with all her heart, and begged Morris to keep going just for her. In the mansion, he bursts in and tells his mom and sister everything that just happened. About the wooden horse he was handed. He slid it right into its rightful place, like the universe finally clicked into order. A single day before the founding festival, Kane got summoned to the Sester Adventurers Guild by their Oriella, the town's resident historian who lived for the stories of the past. Pleads for him to join her and chase the romance written into history. She's pushing for them to investigate a mysterious ancient ruin, one that got revealed when last month's storm triggered a landslide. She told them they still couldn't get inside, because the moment they tried, her companions dropped dead right at the entrance. At the entrance, that gate-like structure pulsed with some sick kind of magic. She hired multiple adventure parties, and every single one got stopped in their tracks, with one unlucky team even walking out with an arm missing. So she kept chasing help at the Adventurers Guild, and boom, they introduced her to Kane. She grabbed his hand and begged him to help her, and the moment Kane caught how wild this was, he didn't hesitate. He agreed to take the job. Oriella thanked him with a bright smile and told him they'd hit the road tomorrow. At the mansion, he learned the other day he'd been handed a mission. At the founding festival, Ryan choked back tears and cried out in crushing disappointment. The moment the day finally arrived, Oriella practically burst with excitement as she stepped into the ruin, ready to uncover whatever waited inside, and flung it at them to prove just how deadly that entrance really was, way worse than they ever guessed, so they figured out the truth. It wasn't built to block people, it was built to wipe out intruders. Because of that, nobody wants to touch the job anymore. Kane strides up, slams his hand into the barrier, and it shatters to pieces instantly. He casually says the barrier is gone, and Oriella's shocked silence hits like a lightning bolt. He told me that the recent earthquake may have cracked the barrier, and that we should act like it could fail next. As they burst through the entrance of the... She's practically vibrating with excitement as she sees the treasure chest at last. Her chest nearly caves in when a massive rock crashes down, and right when she spots some antique figurines, a razor-sharp blade slices in and nearly ends her. Kane told her to breathe and cool off, then demanded she let him inspect the trap first. After sprinting through those brutal traps, they finally crash into a dead end, only to find it utterly empty. Kane scans the room, and something about it feels wildly off. When a foot slams into a magic circle, the vine jerked forward out of nowhere, snapping to grab all three at once. As he fought tooth and nail to break them free, he couldn't shake the feeling that these plants weren't hostile at all, and he started to wonder if they were quietly plotting something. So he decided to play along and see what would happen next. When the vines finally let them go, a brand new place bursts into view. A tiny, adorable golem trotted right up to him. But the moment he snapped his head around, giant golems towered there already, looming like living fortresses. He watches them closely, and nothing sinister ever comes off them. He glanced at the others and couldn't help wondering, were they really the ones tending this garden? He tailed a few of them, and then everything led to him landing right where things got crazy. Land in the spot where a major someone is finally resting. When Oriella jolted awake, panic exploded. She screamed at the sight of a golem. Kane froze when he heard her voice, and everything in him snapped to attention. And then he sprinted over fast to make sure she was okay. When he saw she was swinging that sword, driving the golems back and warning them to stay back, he snapped at her to breathe, calm down. Unbelievably, she still managed to slam her strike into the golem and make it land. So it didn't hesitate, it snapped back on instinct. He barrels in at full speed to rescue her. Oriella begs him to tear through those creatures right now. Right as he started to explain, the golem snapped and blasted an attack at him. But he somehow dodged it at the last second. He snapped at her to stay hidden for now and start thinking, because if he throws down right here, he'll smash this whole garden to pieces. He braced himself, ready to throw down. But right then Millie and Nina barreled in, begging him, don't fight the golems. Because they fought tooth and nail to save the both of them. Those captured men trailed right after them, and the golems stood in front, shutting down every attack these would-be killers launched. Kane realizes the golems are standing guard over this spot, and the weird feeling he'd had ever since they stepped into the ruin comes rushing back. Oriella snapped his attention. She warned him the golem was about to smash in. But he shot her a heartfelt apology for not doing it sooner, then cast a spell that soothed the storm in her mind, and told her straight up that the golems wouldn't lift a finger against them. He told everyone, this spot is where the ruin's creator has his most precious secret sleeping, and the golems stand watch over them. because he truly believes the whole ruin was built to crush anything it senses as a threat. So yeah, if Oriella hadn't panicked out of her mind, those traps never would have fired. The place was so breathtaking it felt like whoever built it was begging visitors to come by. Just don't go poking around to ruin the place, and you could step right in without a problem. Once Oriella finally gave in and agreed to leave, Kane lit up and told her, "Let's bring you fresh flowers now and then, and we'll sneak in some sightseeing while we're at it." Oh, and those captured guys. They're the adventurers Oriella hired earlier, so she's gearing up to hand them straight over to the guild. Kane's crew will sprint back to the festival and crash straight into today's celebrations. The whole place was buzzing so hard it made Mina beam that they came, only for things to fizzle out in the end and leave them with basically no real results. Right when the results hit, Oriella suddenly bursts in out of nowhere. She flips it up and shows them the thing she just snatched, and her excitement practically bursts out as she can't wait to reveal exactly what it is. Kane offers to lend it to him, swearing he'll return it right after, and he's got a gut feeling about what's hidden inside. And if his gut feeling's right, today is about to be absolutely perfect. As soon as night fell, they rushed to the beach and packed themselves in with as many people as they could find. While they frantically wondered where Kane had gone, they suddenly spotted a boat out on the horizon. Suddenly, the whole sky erupted in brilliant fireworks, lighting everything up at once. They stood there both stunned, trying to figure out if it was a spell or a full-on explosion. Rain's eyes went wide. There was Kane out in the middle of the sea, gripping a glowing object like it was alive, and told her mom to stop and stare at the breathtaking sky. Sarah did exactly what she said, and when the fireworks lit up the sky, she stared in pure awe like flowers were blossoming right in the night. Apparently, the explosions lit up every nearby village and stirred total chaos. Then, later on, he got scolded all over again. In the kingdom, the king leans toward the window, soaking in the calm like it's a promise, quiet, peaceful, and perfectly still. He's praying days like this keep rolling. Then a messenger rushes in with devastating news. Last night, a mysterious, terrifying spell wiped out the southern forest. Kane was the one, and the king immediately slapped his own forehead, then waved off the messenger, insisting it wasn't an enemy strike at all, because he knew exactly who could pull something like that. The messenger burst in and said that earlier today, during Lady Tellus and Lady Silk's game of reverse, palace vases shattered all over the place. The king ordered her to make sure not a single person got hurt. Then she got the shock of her life when a new report came in. Turns out the report was all about Tefana, who came back from the campaign this morning, and the expedition cost a fortune too. Still, she had to kick off training with Kane right away, so she handed over the expenses document and left the rest for him to deal with. She said the Marineford Theocracy's envoy is set to land in exactly 1 month, on schedule, like they planned. From the king's first-hand report of the expedition, it looks like the monsters around those regions are snapping and going full berserk. Because a rampage could break out any second, he slammed the alert level to maximum. Once the messenger took off, he stared in horror and realized, at this pace, everything was slipping out of reach. These guys were supposed to carry the kingdom's future on their backs, but he can't help wondering, how truly free-spirited are they, really? Kane could probably smash the monster problem, but diplomacy was the real battlefield. He sat there, staring at the mess, trying to figure out how to fix it. A wild idea snapped into his head, and before he could second-guess it, he scribbled a message and hit send. Kane and Tefana were sword-sparring hard when Tellus and Silk finally showed up. Kane couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Then he watched Tellus pout and press him. "Do I really need some special reason to come see my fiancé?" After Tefana clocked Telly's and Kane's red faces, Telly's dropped the truth. She had a reason to hunt him down today. It was a letter from her father, one he insisted they open and read together, right then. In just 1 month, the king is throwing a huge event to welcome an envoy from the Marineford Theocracy, and he's scrambling to get help entertaining them when the day finally hits. Kane, Tellus, Silk, and Captain Tefana are about to. They have to survive a full month of brutal special training inside the castle, so they'd better get ready now. Inside the castle, a bald egg got toasted. Egg stood right in front of them, staring them down. Made it slam the point home that this was combat training. As the royal knights burst in from behind, Kane's gut tightened. Was this really just combat training? To his shock, every single one of them got handed an apron. They're about to learn how to cook, because in here, rank and power don't mean a thing. What matters is their cooking skill and whether they serve with true hospitality. That bald egg guy snapped his hand together right before. Right before the lesson kicks off, they get everything set. Then, boom, they jump straight into the hands-on training. Kane just stood there, locked in, staring at that textbook like it had answers he couldn't afford to miss. Realizing it was going to be brutally hard. He asked to use magic, and the bald egg snapped back instantly. Magic is forbidden, because in his eyes, real hospitality means sincerity, and everything has to be handmade. And with sheer grit, they pushed themselves to cook up something truly great. But every single attempt crumbled to dust. After what felt like forever, they finally whipped up a really great meal. And the chief cook finally gives him the nod. When the big day finally exploded onto the scene, the four of them went on edge as they stared out at the roaring crowd. While the king wrestled with whether that cooking training had actually taught them the spirit of true hospitality and more. The princess smiled and introduced herself as the third princess, Teshchatera Escort, then added, with real grace, that they were thrilled they'd traveled all the way here from distant lands. Silk introduced herself as Silk von Santana, admitted they're still totally green, and practically begged everyone to dig into the local dishes they'd prepared. Meanwhile, Kane and Tefana are out there hustling as the waiters. Watching the four carry themselves, the king couldn't hide his relief, seeing them truly understand what it means to welcome guests with real hospitality. The crowd erupted in cheers, praising them to the skies. Right then, a messenger burst in with terrifying news. Some rampaging behemoth was spotted charging out of the western forest, and she immediately ordered everyone to evacuate. Remembering how hard they'd busted their tails for this meal, Kane swore nothing at all, would ever wreck it. Bolted to the front gate, and froze the moment he laid eyes on that behemoth. He flicked out his magic and crushed it in the blink of an eye. Moment everyone froze in shock at what they just saw. But the king, he was the one stressing over how the crowd might react. He scanned the crowd, and when he saw their stunned amazement, he couldn't believe it. They're calling it an absolute masterpiece too, an unforgettable parade of local dishes, capped off with a monstrous whole roast they'll never get to see again under the theocracy. Kane couldn't shake the feeling he'd messed up again, and the worry gnawed at him nonstop. The king leaned close and whispered to him, and the truth hit him fast. This boy was packed with surprises, the kind that could plot something this bold. Kane lets out an awkward little affirmation with a stammer. With Tellus riding shotgun behind him, he declares that this is exactly how Kane is supposed to be. The moment everyone dug in, joy lit up their faces. They couldn't stop raving about how insanely delicious the food was. And just like that, Kane and the others crushed their duties and wrapped everything up. At the Royal Capital Guild's headquarters, showed up with a heavy slump in his shoulders, then admitted to Lesha, "I'm starving." Because he was slammed all morning, he totally forgot to eat. Right now, he's convinced that no matter what he eats, it'll taste like pure magic, so Ledia can't help but wonder why the food waiting for him after work is always that insanely good. So he couldn't help but wonder, if he was hungry, why was he heading to the guild instead of the cafeteria? Still, he figured he'd grab just one job on the way back, then he'd finally go stuff his face. Ledia shoved a quest into his hands, along with a weapon. Earned 5 silver coins by standing watch over a young girl. Realizing it was way more interesting than he expected. Snagged the job and stormed out of the guild, no looking back. She hunted for the Beastcan girl in a maid outfit and found her in Myra. Kicked off the escort mission and plunged straight into danger. Bursting with joy, she couldn't stop staring at everything she'd never seen before. She ducked into a flower shop, then tore through a dress shop too. Then he slipped up behind a food stall, right from the back. Jane suddenly realizes this is her first real errand, so they're freaking out, yet somehow he knows the city streets aren't that dangerous. He slammed into a barrel roll straight toward her. But Kane didn't even break a sweat. He handled it with ease. Just as a tree trunk crashed down from above, she never even saw it. Kane had already thrown himself in to save her. He desperately tries to calm it down. When she's trapped in a crowd, he blasts magic into the air and makes everyone else swivel and march the opposite way. Right when he figured she was coming up on the house, 3 ruthless bandits are closing in, ready to snatch her any second. But they all froze in shock when one of them crumpled to the ground. While one was kissing the ground in defeat, the bandana guy exploded with rage and demanded the coward show himself, then fight him fair and square. Kane burst in, snapping the dagger right under his chin. He demanded to know who the guy was before smashing forward and driving his sword in. But he got knocked out cold on the spot. He'd already hinted at what he did earlier. When Kane heard that, his shock hit like a punch. Turns out she declocked him even earlier than that. As soon as they stepped inside, she beamed and greeted her mom with pure joy. Myra's eyes lit up as she told them the city was insanely fun. Then this big brother comes in like a storm, boom, bam, and saves her in one shot. Mom stepped in and demanded to know if he was Kane, then ordered him to rip off his mask. Kane blurted out an apology for getting spotted, but Mama waved it off and told him it was totally okay. Then Myra insisted on heading out by herself because she wanted to respect that choice. After the mother and daughter finished thanking him, he swallowed his hunger and tore himself away from that place. Amira lunged in front of him, cutting him off, and beckoned him to sit down and eat with them. His mom wasn't sure it'd match his taste, but if he's cool with it, he can jump in and join them. Kane nodded and said, "Just let me wrap up one last tiny job, then I'll take you up on it." He hauled the three bandits straight into the guild. He rushed back to the mother and daughter, right there at their table, to join them as they dug in and ate. Just like he figured, nothing hits harder than getting fed after a job, pure perfection. A while later, he finally snapped awake. He circled the date in bold and realized there was just 1 week left. Outside, he fired off magic to read every book. Sylvia's face lit up the second she saw him. Butler Colin asked if something was wrong, and she just admitted she was worried. Kane had been way too serious lately. She's sure the king handed him something huge, and she can't stop wishing she could find a way to help. Colin watched Kane stay this way from morning to night, and it instantly made him wonder what was wrong, because as his butler, Colin knew he couldn't just stand by. He asked what happened, then leaned in, ready to help and actually listen. Kane shot to his feet before he even spoke, already knowing he had a serious problem, and he was completely clueless what to do next. He had no clue what kind of gift could possibly light up her world. Around a month from now, Sylvia's birthday is coming, and you won't want to miss what happens next. Every single year, without fail, he shows up with a brand new present for her. She's always smiling, yet something still feels empty. She dotes on him day after day, so he decides he wants to finally give back in a real way. Hearing that, Colin went quiet and muttered that she was an amazing master. And Kane. He does the exact same thing for her birthday every single year. He lights up with an amazing birthday gift idea for her. And it's basically his way of saying, if this comes from Kane, then Sylvia will finally be happy no matter what. Right now, it finally hits him. He's only made his boss's life harder. And he's praying, please, don't let him go too far again. The boy stared at the ceiling, wrestling with the perfect gift he could give. Then Sylvia closed the distance, shouting his name as if it could pull him back. She blurts out a quick apology for startling him, then tells him to sip some tea, because overthinking is doing him no favors. Right on their way, she clocked the flowers blooming ahead. He couldn't stop wondering if he actually remembered it, then he straight up asked her, why? So she grinned and said she'd keep it tucked away as her little memory, for now. Night fell and he crashed onto his bed, staring into the dark. She couldn't stop replaying what she said earlier, like it was ringing in her head. When Colin swung the door open to tell him his schedule for tomorrow, he shot to his feet, buzzing with the answer, exactly what he should give Sylvia. Years ago, he'd picked a plain flower from the garden for her birthday, and it looked like nothing special to him, but Sylvia lit up like he'd handed her the world, convinced it meant she was truly in love with flowers. He decided to give her something even more gorgeous and way more special, a truly jaw-dropping flower. He cracked open a book and bam, discovered a melt flower. One lone blossom pushes up from the brutal heart of the harsh northern mountains. They call it flower language, a melting heart, and the sight of it allegedly softens you like your own feelings are slowly melting away. He could have just conjured one with magic, but it wouldn't come from the heart. So he snapped at Colin to cancel every single thing on his schedule starting tomorrow until Sylvia's birthday. While he was set to disappear into the northern mountains for a while, Colin reminded him tomorrow was day one of his brutal reverse e-training camp with the king, yet he insisted it mattered more and swore he'd face the king and apologize properly later. And with those words, he launched into his journey. 2 days had already slammed by since he charged into that mountain. But nope, he struck out again, and the moment he pushed forward, a bear and a whole pack of wolves came charging in. But he brushed them off without breaking a sweat and pushed onward, journeying straight ahead without looking back. Sylvia beamed as she watered the flowers, happy as could be. And then out of nowhere, he spotted one. Smiling at it like it just told a secret, he turns around and heads back. On Sylvia's birthday, he raced to get there, then let out a breath of relief, knowing he'd made it in time. He looked over, there was Sylvia, staring straight at him, so he dove into his bag and yanked out the melt flower. He was horrified to realize it was gone, because melt flower's property only lasts until it's picked, and once it's taken, it melts away within a single day, which makes it insanely rare, and now he had no idea what to do. He stared at the flower lying on the ground. Sylvia snapped, panicked, asking what happened because his clothes were shredded. Then he just shrugged, said he'd tripped, and asked if it was her birthday today when she said yes. But he crouched, plucked a flower off the ground, and thrust it into her hands. Then he started to say the next thing. He said he wanted to cook up something way more incredible, then it all fell apart anyway. He hurriedly apologized, then asked her straight up if the flower he picked was the one she'd been caring for. Wiping away her tears, she smiled and blurted out that she wasn't heartbroken at all. She was happy because that flower meant the world to her. He always showers her with over-the-top gifts, but she didn't even need all that. She was already over the moon just because he remembered her birthday. That flower was the very first special one he ever handed her. And then it hit him, what you give isn't the whole story. That's the whole point of it. Your intention is what counts. He lit up and wished her a happy birthday. He thanked her for everything she does. Sylvia looked him in the eye and thanked him, telling him that this flower had turned into the best birthday she'd ever lived. At the side, the butler let out a huge sigh of relief. Everything finally worked out, and then he added, "By the way, this flower is a granny's flower." Flowery words, and I'm saying thanks to you, always. Tafana and Kane strutted through the town streets, turning every corner into an adventure. Everyone looked slammed with work, like they couldn't breathe for a second. In Escort, they throw a massive one-week festival to welcome the dead back home, and the scariest part is this legend. Once every 10 years, the souls of the dead come back to find their families. As he wrestled with it, he tried to remember where he'd heard something just like this before. He spotted a pumpkin and a pile of fruit off to the side, and it hit him. This was Aubin. Tafana looked completely lost, so he pressed her, asking what she thought was hiding under that pumpkin. Then Tafana said it wasn't just anything, it was a fairy horse, a mount meant for the dead. On the way here, they get hauled in fast on a horse crafted from extra carrots, but on the ride back, they climb onto a giant pumpkin behemoth to creep home slow and safe. Kane grinned, clocking it instantly that the idea was the exact same. They press on and he swivels his gaze around, searching for what's next. He can't stop wondering if his family will ever find their way back. Tufana leaned in and told him that every night they light up the sky with lanterns, so everyone knows the season is here. When she was little, she spotted them, and they were so breathtaking that she ditched sword practice on the spot and just stared, totally lost in awe. He spotted a boy nearby, then looked away, watching him hover over that lantern, before finally handing it back with a crushing, exhausted sigh. He strode up to him and demanded to know what was wrong, because the poor kid's face screamed agony, yet when he asked, the kid insisted it was nothing. Realizing this kid came straight out of the slums, he introduced himself and demanded Kane's name. Then Roy stepped in and said, "My name is Roy." Kane leaned in and warned him, if he spilled what was weighing on him, maybe Kane could actually help. Roy eyed him, kid or not, something still didn't add up, so Tafana leaned in and told him Kane was solid, and even a talk with him could make a difference. Roy burst out that the bad guys had ripped off the money he'd saved for a lantern, then he just got knocked around because he couldn't fight back at all. Now he's left without a chance to greet his dad and mom when they return. Sure, getting a lantern sounds simple, but Kane pushes back because he wants to do something that genuinely helps Roy. An idea hit him out of nowhere, and he muttered, "Man's things have been brutal around here lately." If someone had helped him out, he'd probably cough up enough coin to buy them a lantern as a thank you. Tafana blinked like she was lost at first, then after it clicked, she muttered that their night shift was running thin too, and yeah, they could really use an extra set of hands. Roy shot his hand up and asked, "Can I do that kind of work too?" The two share a grin and nod, like they're sealing the deal. Fresh out of the bath, the butler rushed in to help him slip into fresh clothes. After he finished his time learning to serve with Sylvia, he slung the fabric out into the open, letting it hang there like a banner, outside, for everyone to see. After that, he locks in and starts training with the knights. Knights with Tafana and Kane, standing off to the side and watching closely. After sweating through it all, he finally got paid. Good money, no doubt about it. Roy practically burst into motion, sprinting off to grab a lantern, while the two watched from behind. Tafana was ready to help, but she couldn't shake the thought that it'd be easier if they handed over the money right away, and Kane nodded right up. He made it clear he wanted that kid to trust himself, right when three bad guys slammed into his path. He swears the cash is all his. Kane jabbed a finger at Roy and told her, "You're not the same anymore." One of the guys swung a punch at Roy, but Roy ducked and slipped the dodge slam, and the attacker ended up clocking his own comrade instead. Rage surged through him, and he swung a brutal punch again, hitting him like a storm. He dodged in a flash, and the guy's punches missed. right before they slammed into the pig. Pig got slammed unconscious and crashed down right in front of his two comrades. Tafana finally caught on. Kane didn't just hand Roy a fish, he showed him how to fish. She was bursting with joy, already grinning as she expected it from her husband. Kane grinned, already plotting how to make this whole country even better. If he pulls that off, he'll stand before his dad and mom with his chin up, no shame left in his heart. Finally, Roy snagged a lantern and held it up in front of them like a lifesaver. He bolted out to the open field and helped him light it up. When Tafana spots Kane's gloomy face, she mutters, "Guess what? I've got a wonderful fiancé now." She has to soak up this festival like it's her last chance, because she's got to come back and tell her ancestors every glorious detail. Roy loosed the lantern into the sky. Kane snapped his gaze up at the sky, wondering if his parents were watching him from somewhere out there too. He swore he was giving it everything he had, then begged them, please keep an eye on him. After a while, Kane finally ran into his teachers inside the guild and told them with zero hesitation that he was going to track down the massive behemoth everyone couldn't stop talking about. Millie was sure she could take it down in a blink. He nodded and agreed, then remembered the king's warning. Sure, take down that behemoth, but don't you dare torch the whole forest again. A sudden argument erupted at one of the tables, yanking all their attention in an instant. Gio couldn't believe they were really going swordless, so Ray nodded and reminded him, last time, it wasn't blades that sealed it, it was a magic attack. Then she added, and honestly, swords aren't even that versatile to start with. Gio shot up and reminded her. He was the one who'd worn it down so she could finish it off. Until then, she just stood back and watched. Millie and Nina rushed in between them, snapping everyone out of it before things exploded. While Gio wondered if she even understood what he was feeling, Ray fired back to Mina that everything he'd said was pure, outrageous nonsense. When Millie backed Gio's idea, she admitted she was usually the one forced to grind monsters down. Nina's eyes sharpened as if they'd been locked on the truth all along, working as one to heal, protect, and cover every gap. Mages don't just stand around, because the second swordsmen surge in, they've got to stay alert too. Ray nodded and added, yeah, jumping straight to the front lines. That's exactly how they prove they're awesome. The guild went deathly silent, right up until. Meanwhile, the swordsmen and mages kept on bickering, swords and spells at each other's throats. Kane just watched in silence, feeling the situation spiral into something worse, until Lydia leaned in and told him, straight up, that this magic versus swords fight really does happen sometimes. He kept wondering if she was gonna stop them, but she knew once it spiraled that far, there was nothing left to do, just sit back and watch. Which, after the arguments erupted, the adventurers stormed out of the guild, then split up, each heading off on their own route. Outside, Millie sat there, and then, when the door swung open, a new person showed up. He thought it was Nina, then Kane stepped in and everything snapped into place. Millie was totally clueless about what to do next. And that's when she finally blurted out the one thing she absolutely wasn't supposed to say. Still, she's dead sure of one thing: she can't afford to lose. When it matters most, it's this sword that has to shield Nina, so she's got to be stronger than Nina herself. Meanwhile, Nina was sulking hard the moment he came up to her. She realized, as the back line, she can't let Millie get hurt, so she vowed to become stronger than any sword fighter. Kane awkwardly let out a nervous chuckle, because it hit him that his teachers were exactly the same. They genuinely care about each other, just not enough to sync their timing yet. If one of them finally swallows their pride and apologizes, that moment will still haunt them later, and it'll leave a real scar. Remembering the saying about how the rain leaves the ground hard, Lesha pushed to round up every adventurer in the guild. Then they finally settled who was truly the strongest. But then she realized the guild property was busted, and she was the one left to clean up the whole mess. Kane believes the best way to settle who's stronger is to duke it out, but then he decides to turn it up a notch. He stared straight at the quest, like it was about to change everything. And the second he saw the plea about taking down the behemoth, a wild idea snapped into place. He rounded up every last adventurer he could find. So they said, forget holding back, just slam everything you've got into each other. To figure out whether the swordsmen or the mages are stronger, they're forced to clash in a straight-up fight. As the crowd roared in celebration, he couldn't help but feel thrilled by the thought. Kane reminded everyone it was only a mock battle, no injuries, no real harm. Then they nodded, and Kane slipped out into the bushes like a shadow. Right when the fight was about to explode, they suddenly got hit with a roaring roar, unleashing the terrifying presence of a massive monster. Gio shouted for everyone to run, but Nina and Millie froze right where they stood. Decision deciding to charge the monster at their usual breakneck tempo. While Millie went in with her sword, Nina blasted the monster with magic to back her up. And right alongside them, every other adventurer threw themselves into the fight. They poured every last ounce of strength into the fight until the monster finally crumpled. The moment they realized they'd actually brought down that monstrous giant, it hit them like a wave, pure, unstoppable victory. They locked eyes and broke into matching smiles. Kane suddenly bursts out of nowhere, firing up a wild lecture. On any adventure, you've got to master both swords and magic. So the two of them locked onto their mission again. Fighting was their purpose, and they remembered it. And they finally swallowed their pride, then apologized to each other. And just like that, the other adventurers followed suit. Which made Kane grin. Remembering that this behemoth was part of Kane's mission, Millie wondered if he'd caused all of it. He tried to play it off, but Nina clocked it instantly. His puppeteering, a stuffed monster, was way too suspicious. Because that giant behemoth they fought got dealt with way too easily. After he crushed the behemoth, he grabbed its body and turned it into a puppet. While back at court, the king just facepalmed hard, stewing over the report that the forest had been burned to a wasteland again. As he kept sharpening his skills with every brutal swing of his sword, Sylvia stormed up to him and pressed an academy letter into his hands. For the academy's founding anniversary, he got invited to represent the school at the biggest main event, because the academy's about to throw a massive festival that'll pull in the entire royal capital. Kids from schools all across the map will storm into the capital and team up for 3 events, battling hard to crown the single most outstanding school. As they throw their founding anniversary at the academy, Kane can't help but feel cocky, mainly because they've got him. He's a total beast, and if his power doesn't need to become famous, cool, but since they picked him, he's going to give it everything. Next, Sylvia started packing with stars in her eyes, until she heard the festival wasn't for a week, and her excitement instantly turned into a scorching wave of embarrassment. At long last, the day of the founding festival is finally here. The king booms that the main event starts right here, then fires up everyone's resolve. Each of you needs to go all out as your school's representative. Meanwhile, other academy students crowd in and rip into the capital representative with brutal mockery. When he realized they were still just kids, they're already convinced the royal capital's academy is nothing more than some average school, and announced that the winners wouldn't just take a prize, they'd get tuition exempted as their reward. Meanwhile, Kane could practically feel that deadly killing intent blasting straight at him. When Tefana finally arrived and apologized for being late, the students from the other academies went still, because her look didn't match anyone else's, and her aura hit like raw lightning. Tefana strutted around like she owned the whole throne, bragging that she was the only one of his fiancés still in the running, because she practically dragged them into forcing her to be here. The king let out a sharp cough, then proclaimed the start of everything that was about to happen. The very first thing that happens is a sword dance that lights the whole moment on fire, which played right into Tefana's hands, her specialty. When Kane said he'd go all out in sword practice like always, you could feel trouble coming. The students stared at him, totally baffled, like, did he really step in here without even knowing what a sword dance is? Because a sword dance for 2 isn't something you pick up overnight. You've got to nail the timing down to the beat and master the technique to control those heavy blades with precision. They lunged forward and started hacking with their swords, slamming each other's punches out of the air. Watching it happen, the crowd and everyone else around them went completely still, trapped in pure, jaw-dropping shock. Silk just echoed that mocking student's words, because you don't pick that up overnight. Then she snapped that nobody here understands how many times those two have been smashing into each other, blade to blade, day after day. Their swords are practically stitched into their bodies by now. Now they're not just timing moves, they're reading each other's intentions like it's obvious, and the way they sync up so perfectly makes his fiancée feel us, and straight up sparks a wave of jealousy. As soon as the sword dance finally ended, right when the last slash hit the air, they panted for breath, shocked to realize Kane and Tefana's practice hit like a real battlefield. Then Kane shrugged and swore it was just casual training, hoping it didn't bother them. Then it was time for the dance. Sure, everyone else thought practice would save them and they'd be fine, but these students couldn't afford to slip because they were carrying everyone's hope on their backs. Kane just stared at them in silence and Tellus shot back, "What's wrong?" Kane waved it off, "Nothing, it's all good." So they kept pushing, praying the practice would finally click, because if it was Tellus and Kane, Silk was sure they'd dance just as perfectly as they did in rehearsals. Nervousness swallowed him, then the moment the music kicked in, everyone surged into a dance, and the princess suddenly stepped on his feet. which made everyone think it was all over for them. Blushing hard, he apologized, confessing he was too nervous and that he didn't dance right. Kane knelt, flashed a grin, asking her if she still remembered that flower field we danced in during practice. Back then, she was bursting with life, and he suddenly realized he couldn't stop loving the way they danced together when she was like that. He shot his hand out, assuring her it didn't matter where they were, they just had to break loose and dance together. Tellus grabbed his hand and swept him into a graceful dance. Silk straight up admitted their dancing hits a whole other level, and yeah, Kane's leadership is wild, but Tellus backing him is like a gorgeous bloom in the spotlight, like they were meant to be together from day one, and somehow, Tafana still couldn't help but feel a little jealous. After the dance event exploded into chaos, then the whole crowd got a quick breather before the next event hit. The last test was a brutal puzzle labyrinth, so Kane pinned everything on Silk because she majored in commerce. But she's nowhere, just vanished into thin air. And he ordered Tafana to guard the princess while he dashed off to hunt for Silk. He spotted her perched on a circular pond like she owned the whole world, and demanded to know if she was feeling sick. Silk shook her head in panic, apologizing for the trouble, then worry hit her hard. What if she couldn't match him perfectly? Tafana is insanely cool and strong, Tellys is pure-hearted, and her dancing is so beautiful that everybody just got completely hooked. And she just knew deep down she didn't have anything like that. Kane asks her if she remembers that night when everyone finally showed up after they dropped the news about this event. She was the one who told Tafana to stay exactly like herself, and she was the same person who taught Tellys how to begin, by forging the body's strength that becomes the real foundation of dancing right. She's the one who quietly broke down what a sword dance is for Tafana, just to be safe, and she's also the one who stepped back so Tellus and Kane could drill even longer. For today, she dove into puzzles so intensely that she started stealing sleep from herself. He thinks the only power she's got is her noble drive to grind in silence behind the curtain, night after night. Terry blinked, then Silk flashed him a sweet smile and thanked him for keeping watch over her. Until they finally managed to pull it off. From the back, the two ladies watched them move in perfect sync, and pure jealousy burned in their chests. When the dust finally settled, the king stepped up and declared that Kane's team stormed in as the winners, and the other three teams colliding into the chaos. With every team smashing their run, no one could honestly claim they were above the rest, so he leaned into his king and organizer power, declared every single person a winner, and handed them all full tuition exemption. He's convinced that just standing here as their school representative is already a glorious way to help the country grow, and even though those words first came from Kane and the others, they land in his hands like the perfect excuse to follow along. Even though Kane's team hit the hardest, their run got ripped away because the night captain got mixed in with the students, and they were disqualified. Tafana pressed a hand to her forehead and blurted an apology, totally kicking herself for forgetting those details. The students burst into laughter before they even managed an apology. The truth hit hard. They were absolutely blown away by Kane's team, and Kane just waved it off, saying it was fine, while everyone kept pushing with everything they had. Next year, if another founding festival shows up, he'll pull them in and make them fight all over again. And so the founding festival kept roaring forward. Watched it unfold, and the celebration kept rolling deep into the night. Meanwhile, Palma and Kane are totally crushed, like the weight of everything just dropped on them. He swore he'd whip up a brand new product to follow up on Reverse, but getting it off the ground is way harder than he thought. In a world where entertainment barely exists, he couldn't stop asking, what do I even bring to the table? He could build a game console with creation magic, but that would mean shoving his own values down everyone's throat. Palma wonders if he's really free between his duties and studies, because she keeps seeing people swarm him for all kinds of help, and when she asks, Kane just tells her it's okay. Having time like this is also his way to unwind. And honestly, he just loves chatting like this with her. Back then, she never would have guessed they'd land in a moment like this. When they first met, she couldn't imagine they'd be sitting here, talking like this, and now she's asking, do you remember the first time we met? They braced themselves and acted out that breakneck rush again. Back then, she was trapped, couldn't find her way back no matter how hard she tried. But he helped her hunt down her dad, and Kane stood there stunned, because she remembered every detail like a true star, acting like the real leading lady in her own story. Palma has zero clue what a leading lady even means, but the idea of slipping into someone else feels way too fun to resist. Then, after that talk, a wild thought suddenly sparks in his head. So when he finally marched into the king's presence, he made his demand. He wanted to build a theater where that play could be performed. The king signed off on it, and the second the plans were set, they bulldozed into action. Construction of the theater started right away. Kane called every actor in and made it crystal clear he wanted them to put on a play. After breaking it all down and diving into the role playing, he shot them a confident grin and promised they'd be fine because he'd already tested their limits. If they team up, they'll create an absolutely incredible show that blows everyone away. And yeah, he's got one more person coming. But he's a little shy, and it was Yudia in a wolf costume who took his invitation, since she had time and couldn't resist his idea. And with that, the countdown kept roaring, preparations surged forward. Right up until the night of the performance. Palma's nerves are all over the place. He got so embarrassed the second he realized how many people were watching. At last, it's showtime. Everyone's buzzing with curiosity because they've never seen a play before, and the theater's packed to the brim. Kane fires up the actors and says, to craft them the most incredible little Red Riding Hood they've ever seen. The cast snapped into their spots, ready for the chaos to start. But Palma's still shaking with nerves because her lines have vanished from her head. Kane can't blame her at all. This is her very first time standing in front of a crowd this massive. After all that practice, she's ready to step out and prove to everyone exactly what kind of actress she can be. He burst onto a stage and shot his hand up, then detonated an explosion. And then boom, those fireworks erupted, leaving everyone in total shock. Then they erupted into applause, clapping hard. He leaned in and promised her it would all be okay, because every single person was backing her up. And he's seen firsthand just how brutally hard she's worked. He blurted out every single name, one after another. So the role play kicks off right now. A tiny red hood with writing on it pops up on stage like it's about to cause trouble. Her mom shoved her out the door to her grandma's place deep in the forest because grandma was sick and needed food, and the moment the wolf figured out where she was headed, everything went from bad to deadly fast. It rushed to her grandma's house to tie Granny up and flop on the bed. Then Little Red Riding Hood, playing Granny, froze when she finally saw her actual Granny, who turned into a wolf. Mr. Wolf lunged at her with a vicious pounce, but right before he could strike, a huntsman ripped off a shot and stopped him in his tracks. Wolf, after Granny's untied, she yanked her granddaughter into a tight hug, and Little Red Riding Hood turns to Mr. Wolf, who is now conscious. She yanked off her hood, and the whole moment shifted as her next move began. She stretched out her hands, beckoning him to drop the hate, swearing to him that race doesn't decide who you are. With teary eyes, Mr. Wolf rose up and crushed her in a fierce hug. And just like that, the Little Red Riding Hood tale comes to a dramatic end. The actors dropped into a deep bow and shouted thanks to the crowd, who left the stage feeling totally satisfied with how they performed. He couldn't stop wondering what performance would hit next. Right then, a letter stamped by the king landed in front of them. The king footed the bill by writing down the stage construction, the workers' pay, and the ceiling repairs for the damage he caused when he crashed through it during the fireworks. Looks like they're not about to fire up another show anytime soon. It had been ages since he showed up in Yuya's place, and as soon as he did, he couldn't stop wondering what Yuya wanted from him. Yuya, knees in the dirt as he hammered the land with his hoe, snapped to attention when he saw him, and shot him a grateful thanks for showing up. They went inside and Yuya started brewing tea, while he just sat there, staring at the cup like it held the answers. Kane doesn't buy it. He snaps that tea's totally fine, and right then he spots the coffee maker. He can't stop thinking about unleashing it in the capital. When they press him about his power, Kane lights up and says it lets him reach and help countless people. Yuya loved the answer and pressed, asking if Kane ever wondered where that drive of his came from, especially since he had that power too. Kane nodded, saying it could have been born right from it. But Yuya refuses to believe power, or the lack of it, has anything to do with saving someone, and after saying exactly what he wanted to hear, Yuya flashes him a smile and shoved a bracelet onto him. It's a sealing bracelet meant to tame the rampaging monster of Fabianil. Once it's worn, it seals the wearer's power. And he's begging Kane to put it on, just to try living a normal life, because once you truly grasp normal, the extraordinary feels way more special. And hey, no Fabianil monster stands a chance. That bracelet won't budge. It'll lock on for a full week until the time limit runs out. He tore back to the capital, stomach growling with hunger. So he unleashed magic to teleport, and nothing happened. He tried again, then Tafana clocked him. Kane demanded what he was up to, then scratched the back of his head like he didn't know how to explain. Then he spotted the bracelet, and his magic instantly died in his hands. Wait, if he can't use magic at all, then what's he even good for? Tefana leaned in and confessed that it happens to her too, sometimes out of nowhere. After she swings that sword every single day, there are moments when her mind just goes totally blank. Even if his magic got wiped out, she still knew he'd stay exactly who he is. Nothing could change that, so stop twisting your face like it does. Kine shot her a grateful smile and thanked her. And then he kept moving on too. Swing into a fruit shop, grab some fresh fruit, and dig in right there. He rushed to the guild, but nothing there matched what he's become now. Right then, his teachers barged in. In the second he spots it on the board, a quest to hunt a high-class behemoth that's stomping across the whole field. They snatched that quest the moment it hit their hands. Let him charge in with full force, even if he was desperate to refuse. With magic gone, his choices shrink overnight, meaning he actually had way more options than he ever realized, and now he's about to see the world in a whole new way. He can't bring himself to tell his teachers he's magicless right now, because he refuses to let them worry. When the two fire the question, "Did you still not trace the target?" he's left scrambling. He realizes he always relies on his search to nail the target, but right now, he has zero clue where that thing is about to pop in from. A massive behemoth erupts out from behind, and they launched in fast, and somehow, they slipped out of the way with razor-sharp dodges. He didn't throw blame at Kane, because Kane clearly wasn't doing great, and besides, this is the job they signed up for, so they can deal with it themselves. As the two battle the monster, it suddenly dawns on him that if he had magic, the world would have been his playground. So many options, so many wins. But since he doesn't, he's got zero tricks left, just one thing, staying protected. And then, like it just happened, he replayed his conversation with Yuya in his head. And he realized something huge, power or not, he still had choices, because magic just blows those options wide open. But the real question is simple: what will he do? The monster charges straight at Nina. He lunges forward in a blink, snatching her out of danger. He stares at his hands with total certainty, convinced his power is built to save people. He remembered this: no matter how savage the Fabaniel monster was, it still couldn't crack it. So he snapped into action and decided to beat them all. Then, with pure grit, he broke the bracelet and he slammed in with a massive assault, and with one relentless push, he shattered the monster and sent it down for good. After a while, Yuya couldn't even breathe. He was stunned to realize he'd actually shattered the bracelet, and demanded to know if it finally clicked for him why he'd been handed that power in the first place. Kane fires back with the exact same answer as before: his power was always meant to save people. Yuya grinned at his answer and pushed. So, want to see creation magic in action, like how to forge a coffee maker and more. Kane refuses, because he can't just chill while the king's eyes drift over that burned-out wasteland, and the moment he does, he knows they'll hit him with the same scolding for overdoing it again. Then Kane squared up against a demon king called Set. The demon hurls a roaring fireball straight toward them. But he slips the attack like it's nothing, plants a hard sidestep, and whips his sword forward, and then burst in behind the boy to unleash an attack. But Kane was so insanely fast that he couldn't possibly stop, because he already. Set didn't see it coming. Kane appeared behind him in the blink of an eye and wiped out the demon, then shot a hand out, thanking Set for the spar, because ever since Kane came to Dorontal, he's barely got any chances to fight someone in training. Seth brushed it off and told Kane Sama, "It's fine." Before he left, he told Set to do whatever he wanted this afternoon. Set unleashed a brutal command for his butler, Dalmatia, and fires back asking what he thinks about him now. Because Dalmatia used to be his subordinate, he can't say the real answer, so he forces out a reluctant, "I agree." Go on, tell him to act like he didn't hear the Demon King grumbling for a while. That human Kane is special, super strong, super wise. Set can't stop wishing he'd be like that too, but right now he's stuck as nothing more than a training partner, and it gnaws at him. What do his subordinates and the people back home really think of him? Dalmatia tells him, "Stop overthinking, you're going to burn yourself out," and pushes him to chill before he fries. But if that burden crushes him this hard, Dalmatia will always be there, ready to rush in and help. With a single word from Kane, Set, the answer hit instantly, and Set appeared at once. Since Kane had to slam out a quick patrol of the territory, he decided to let Haku and Jin run wild as his little warm-up. It means he'll be the one staying over to pet Set, even as the Demon King's pride was slammed straight into the dirt. And even with everything going on, he still accepted the task with perfect manners and a ready grin, and then demanded to know how everything spiraled into this. Cornered with no other option, he still found time to play with Kane's pets. And when the boy finally came back, he bowed with respect and welcomed him like a hero returning to his place. He said Kane's pet was totally obsessed with that frisbee, then blew my mind when he told me the kid actually poured magic into it, so it flew perfectly. He leaned in and asked if he could whip up all kinds of things with total freedom. Then the boy grinned and proved he could make a whole bunch of different stuff. He couldn't stop thinking, could Kane forge something even stronger than him? But Kane never even entertained that thought, and once he finally started thinking, everything shifted. He took a deep breath and decided to give it a shot. He slammed down multiple magic circles, one after another, like he was calling down something bigger than fate, and forged an anti-Kane strategic weapon, the Arc Golem. Set grinned with a mischief that practically sparkled in the dark. He slammed his hand onto the golem, naming it Nornir, and locking it in as his summon. As soon as the golem pledged its loyalty to him, everything changed. He shoved his nasty dark underarm out and, to build a towering challenge and shove the boy into facing Nornir and him, because he has to prove he's their master, and Nornir will be waiting for him on the very top floor of that dungeon. Kane's stomach twisted with worry as he couldn't figure out why he'd end up doing something like this, but burst into pure joy the moment he realized he could finally go all out. Palma got yanked through space and dropped straight into the dungeon. Tafana's head spun as she stared at this place, stunned that she'd just been teleported here out of nowhere. She spotted a kid. She found out she was supposed to deliver the delicious bread she baked for her big brother, but somehow she ended up here instead. Tafana prayed her brother wasn't here as well. But the second she heard her big brother was Kane, she swallowed her pride and apologized, telling the kid that her future husband might have pulled another stunt again. Still, she'd seen him go way too far in every way imaginable. The place screams danger, so she stays right beside the kid, watching every move. Up on the top floor, Set locked his eyes on Nornir. Dalmatia fully believed he had just pulled off the most daring move of all. After he got turned into a pet sitter, Set decided he finally earned more than this, because with that dungeon and Nornir's power in his hands, he'll crush Kane, and when he does, he'll snatch back the Demon King's throne. In the end, they're still forced to lean on Kane's power, the golem that drives this whole arc. Still build a monster like that, then step up to a foe strong enough to crush you. That's the kind of back they once saw, the Demon King they're determined to follow. Set froze, stunned that the king stayed utterly unshaken, even with everything this bad unfolding in front of him. The king trusted Kane's power completely because they'd known each other forever. Or else he'd never hand over his precious daughter to him. Dalmatia pushed an idea on them, let's play reverse. Kane was out there living it up, having a blast going. He went all out, crushing monsters left and right. But realizing climbing those stairs is a total pain. He tore through the walls above like they were made of paper. After he wiped out a pack of monsters, Tiffing finally burst into the boss room. He was barely hanging on until Nornir crashed in, and it almost killed him. Luckily, Set slammed the command to stop. Kane was the real target. He never saw it coming when someone got teleported right nearby, and somehow, he still pushed through all the way here. After hearing that Tafana was a knight captain, the kid was dead sure that if she and Kane tied the knot, fear would vanish. There'd be no more door until. Seated on a djinn, Kane slammed through every ceiling of the wall, blasting higher into the sky as they rose. Until they burst into the boss room. He blinked in shock. There were familiar faces staring back at him. And he told us he'd used a search, just to make sure he wouldn't trigger an explosion right where people were standing. Out of nowhere, Nornir struck, and he barely dodged it at the last second. As he kept dodging, he realized the golem he'd built was insanely fast. He wiped it out in seconds. He finished it with one unstoppable strike, who hurled a blazing fireball straight at him. But he still slipped under it at the last second, fast as lightning, just barely dodging it. Before he unleashed a barrage of fireballs, he snapped them away with ease and deflected them like it was nothing, as they're laughing while they tear into each other in the middle of the fight. His eyes fluttered, but he still wasn't anywhere near waking up. Before he whipped it through the air at the little girl. While Kane knew there was no way he'd reach there in time. He used magic to tear it apart. He throws himself in front of the blast and shields the kid from the impact. Seeing the situation throws up red flags and leaves the kid uneasy. Kane was convinced he just wanted to go full throttle and cut loose, and yeah, he admitted he felt the exact same. That was pure fun for Set, so much that he's convinced his master is insanely strong, and now he's ready to brag to everyone back home that he serves Kane. He apologized for dragging him through that test, and Kane told him, "Next time, let's talk it out like proper adults." And just like that, time stretched, and he thrust out his hand. After that, everyone burst into laughter, admitted they'd had an absolute blast, and headed back together. The moment hit them, they'd totally gone too far, and decided to start clearing up the wreckage, right up to chapter 27. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope you love this manga. Have a great day.